Greetings, viewers. This is King H. Welcome to my channel. Please like this channel, subscribe to this channel, and share the videos from this channel. The discussion of today that I want to have has to do with the President of Ghana and the speech he made in the United Nations or the United Nations General Assembly, requesting for the UN to add additional membership to the G20. But I don't think that's going to happen. The West don't want that. The European Union is already a full member of the G20, and the G20 is complete because the G20 are nations that are, industrious. The continent of Africa is not industrious. But the continent of Africa needs to be industrious if it wants to be a powerful continent that will be respected. And it's not by asking, it's not by begging, it's not by pleading, it's not by repeating the same ideas over and over to the West, in the United Nations, in the Commonwealth, in the Francophonie, to be part of the West. African leaders need to stop doing that nonsense. They need to stop begging and begging and begging and start learning how politics is being played. Use the same tactics and strategy that the West use on other nations so that they could thrive. That's what African Union, that's what the 54 countries in Africa need to do in order to grow their power, because power must be nourished. You see, African leaders, when they come in power, they want to stay in longer, thinking that staying in longer, that means that they're growing their power. But by growing their power individually, they're making the country, the 54 countries of Africa, weaker, because there is no institutional power. African countries don't have institutional power. They just have men who are powerful or pretend to be powerful to control the countries in Africa. Meanwhile, it makes those countries weak. And because that is being done, the West does not respect Africa. They don't give a damn about Africa. They don't even give a damn about the humanity of African people. They might pretend that they do, but really they don't. What they care about is the resources that the continent of Africa has. And for some reason, that is only the bargaining chip that African countries or African leaders have towards the West. But they need to start re-strategizing. They need to start rethinking. You see, many African countries are part of the La Francophonie, which is controlled by France. And France is one of the members in the G20. France wants to control La Francophonie institutions, which includes the French African countries, because it gives them the power. It gives them the leverage to be financially influential. And by them being financially influential, the African countries and the African leaders go around and beg France for France to do for them what they need to do for themselves. This is what we need. We need Africa, French Africa, as well as English Africa, need to change the strategy of how they do business with United Kingdom or Britain, as well as France. Because power is not based from one individual when it comes to global power, when it comes to global political power. Power must be nourished through the institution and through people who can utilize that power for the interest of the 54 countries in Africa, for the interest of the continent of Africa. But our African leaders like to stay in power 10 years, 15 years, until somebody comes up and topple them and take them out before they will step down. Many of the French African countries are like that. Some of the other English countries are like that. But look at how the institutions in Europe are run. Look at how France is run. Look at how United Kingdom is run. You have a new prime minister. You have different leaders taking over. But in Africa, the leaders want to be in power continuously 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And then you want to beg and ask the West to include Africa to be part of the G20. Well, Africa is not ready for it. And Africa doesn't even need to beg to be part of the G20. If Africa prepares the continent Africa well enough to be powerful enough to protect the interests of the continent and the people of the continent, the West will beg Africa to be included into the African Union. But for some reason, African leaders think that they need to keep begging the West. They need to beg France. They need to beg United Kingdom. They need to beg United States. They need to beg other countries. They need to go and beg Russia. They need to Africa can become a powerful continent if they can depend and rely on the people and choose good leadership that has the interests of the people. And then create an industrial environment in the continent, because that will create jobs and that will create a strong economy. With a strong economy, you can have a strong military. But with the lack of economic growth, Africa becomes stifled, and they keep going around begging. India is part of the G20. There are many other countries that are part of the G20. As a matter of fact, many countries in Europe are part of the G20, including the European Union. The only reason South Africa is part of the G20 is probably because, well, they have a big huge of white in South Africa, and they control the economy in South Africa. If the economy was mostly controlled by blacks in South Africa, I'm quite sure they would not include South Africa to be part of the G20. But that's the only reason why South Africa is there, because there's a huge white population that control the economy of South Africa. If the economy of South Africa was being controlled by blacks and were being mismanaged as they continue to mismanage shit, as black people continue to mismanage shit, they won't be part of the G20. But Africa leaders need to stop begging the West to do for them when they can actually do what is necessary. If they could actually use the institutions, create institutions that work for the interests of African people. But they don't want to do that. French African countries, they'll beg France. English African countries, go beg United Kingdom. Now they even, some of the French African countries are now running to Russia. You think is, for some reason, they think that other nations will put their own interests, the interests of Africa first, over their own interests. That is stupidity. No other human being will put their own interests over put their own interests aside for the interests of other nations, because that has to do with survival. And this is something that Africans need to understand. If we want to survive, we will have to put our interests first, not begging and asking other nations like Russia, other nations like United States, other nations like Britain, other nations like France to do for Africa what Africa needs to do for Africa. Africans need to do what is the interest of Africa. But for some reason, African leadership and African people suffer from begging. The leadership begs, the people begs. It's ridiculous. And how do you think we will have respect? How do you think we'll have honor if we cannot build our own continent? We want to be part of the G20. You think being part of the G20 would create a stronger Africa? No. A stronger Africa must come from the Africans. who want to build it. We need to cut. We don't need to be part of the Commonwealth. We need to get out of the Commonwealth. That's one another tactic you can use to pressure the United Kingdom to pay reparations to the countries that they colonize. Same thing with France. Pressure France that we will get out from La Francophonie. And if they don't want to let us go, then we'll pressure them to pay reparations for colonizing Africa. That's what Africa needs to do. And if that doesn't work, well, you push that forward while building the continent of Africa, putting industrial engineering that is needed to create jobs. Because if we can grow the industrial system in Africa, then the continent will have jobs where they won't have to beg from the West to be part of them. We need to stop begging from them. African leaders need to stop begging and start creating systems that work for Africa and for the interests of Africa. And if we don't do that, we will never have the respect we need in this world, and we will be the stepping stone of other races. Other races will step on us to grow as they do. And our African leaders will continue to beg and beg. Create industries. Industrialize Africa. But do it intelligently without, begging or taking loans from other nations. Those loans will affect Africa because those loans need to be paid. But it's just ridiculous. Begging to be part of the G20 is ridiculous. Begging to be part of any institution that is owned by the West is ridiculous. African leadership and Africans need to wake up and understand that politics is something that affects the lives of Africans, and Africans need to be involved in politics, needs to understand what is happening in the continent and try to change shit. Not just allow the leaders to continue to do what they want or what they wish to do. Because if we don't voice our own opinions towards the leadership that is in play in our countries, only the people will suffer. Africa wants to depend on the West on everything, but that's not going to happen. We don't need to be part of the G20. We don't need to be part of the Commonwealth. We don't need to be part of La Francophonie. We don't need to be part of their own institutions. We need to create ours that works for us and has the interests of African people. Without which, we will continue to beg. Our leaders will continue to beg that Mali must stand strong against France. Guinea must stand strong against France. Other French African countries must stand strong against France. Get out from the French Francophone system, because it doesn't have the interest of French Africa, but only the interest of France. The relationship that France and French Africa has only benefits France, and that empowers France. Same thing with the English African countries. Being part of the Commonwealth only benefit the United Kingdom. It doesn't benefit Africa as much. So we also need to, African countries need to get out from the Commonwealth as well. Because since when our leaders ask for them to do certain things to be part of the G20, they refuse. They can refuse, but have the audacity to interfere in West Africa, to interfere in the ECOWAS. France has the audacity to interfere in ECOWAS because they want to control resources that enrich France. Just like Britain or United Kingdom wants to control certain aspect in English Africa so that it benefits the United Kingdom, which is why they have military bases all over Africa. Are those military bases for the interests of Africa? No, it's for the interests of the United Kingdom. It's for the interests of France. We don't need to have other military bases in the continent of Africa. We need to kick them out of Africa. Kicking them out will also create jobs that is needed for Africans who want to be part of the military and who want to take, because Africa is just spending unnecessary money, having contracts with United Kingdom, having contracts with France, and having a military. No. We need to change. We need to look at how things are working in the 21st century and utilize them. But the African leaders, they suck. Literally, they are beggars. They don't have a clear map of the future of Africa, especially without European powers. They think that the only way Africa can survive is only if Africa stands beside the West or works with the West in order for Africa to grow. But that's not. The West has been sucking their wealth from Africa. That's the relationship we have. They grow and we suffer. This is King Angel.